And welcome back. Now, the matter of the CR17 campaign funding continued yesterday. Legal representatives for President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Public Protector, Advocate Mkhwebane, made their submissions at the Constitutional Court. Mkhwebane and the economic freedom fighters applied to the Apex Court to appeal the judgment of the North Gauteng High Court, which set aside the Public Protector's report into Ramaphosa's campaign donations. And Professor Dinyiko Maluleke joins us right now to help us unpack some of this. Professor, good morning. Good to see you again. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina. Good morning to the viewers. Always a pleasure.
Prof, let's start with looking at the bigger picture here with regard to this particular application to the Constitutional Court. And it speaks, of course, to campaign funding. It speaks to state affairs and, where the parameters are, the public protectors' actually scope of work. But how would you characterize, how would you summarize what we're actually dealing with right now in this particular instance?
Yes, it speaks to all of those things you have mentioned and more. I think it is a very good situation in any democracy in the world when the highest office in the land is made to account for its actions in a court of law. And when the president of the country goes to court to defend himself, as we have seen President Cyril Ramaphosa doing in this case, it is also a good sign of a healthy democracy that we can have a conversation about what is it that a Chapter 9 institution can do and cannot do. What is it that the president's office or the deputy president's office, as was the case when these things happen, can be involved in and cannot be involved in? In terms of the bigger picture, these are wholesome conversations. These are necessary conversations. And the fact that we are able to have them without some of the shenanigans that we have seen happen in the world with presidents taking shortcuts and people taking other routes to find relief, I think this is a good sign.
Now, Professor Maluleke, if we can just hone into one of those arguments, and this, of course, speaks to whether President Cyril Ramaphosa's funding for his ANC election campaign actually forms part of state affairs, because this was one of the arguments that was presented. What's your view on that?
Well, we know what the court's view was, the Pretoria High Court, that is. I mean, they didn't think that was the case. I mean, they dismissed that particular argument, but it is being appealed against, as you can see. My own view is that the conversation is a necessary one, Sakina. It is necessary for South Africans and for the courts of this land to really have a conversation about whether just because a deputy president is not wearing the hat of deputy president, there is absolutely no limit, no constitutional guidelines to their conduct, the conduct of their affairs, which may or may not impinge on their positions in government. Now, that is not to say that he is guilty or not guilty. That's not my job. But I do think that that conversation is a necessary one, and it's a good thing that we're having it.
Now, one of the other issues that arose was, of course, from the president's legal team that repeatedly stated that the public protector, Advocate Mkhwebane, is out to, what they said, nail the president. Now, that again also makes for an interesting conversation around the relationship between the president and the public protector. Again, Professor, if you could just weigh in on that and tell us what you make of this and how does that, in fact, impact on the state of our democracy?
Yeah, you see, the argument seems to me to be that the cabinet, the public protector was so zealous and so enthusiastic to find fault that along the way she either discounted some facts or simply ignored others, and that in her enthusiasm to find him guilty, some basics were not properly followed. Now, that is for the court to decide. The question is whether she was so biased in the pursuit of a finding that she did not follow the rules of argument, that she thought what was outside the purview of her office was inside it, and that she conflated, as the previous court has argued, her powers and gave herself more powers than she is allowed because she was so zealous to find him guilty. Now, it's very difficult for me to comment on that. All I can say to you is this, Sakina. Over the 26-odd years of democracy, what we have seen in this country is that the courts of the land, the judiciary, has really gallantly tried to defend our rights. The Public Protector's Office, it seems to me that the burden of challenging the highest office in the land has fallen on it, both the previous one and the current one. I wouldn't be so sure that Parliament has always been able to do its oversight role effectively. But if you look at the bigger conversations that we are having here, barring that this particular public protector may be biased, and that we must wait and hear if courts find her biased indeed. Because just because one side argues she was biased is no reason for us to conclude now that she is. But I think we will know very soon.
Indeed, we shall. And just speaking of Parliament, and one of the questions that, of course, was sharply raised was the President's response to former DA leader Mkhwebane's question with regard to some of the funding activities for his CR17 campaign to ascend to the presidency of the ANC. And there was an interesting conversation that was made about, whether he willfully misled Parliament, because remember, he responded in the first instance and then came back and essentially backtracked, if you will, on what he had said previously in response to Mkhwebane. What did you make of that, Professor Maluleke, and the arguments that were presented? Because at some point, it becomes so interesting when you think you literally have to be inside someone's mind to understand whether that was a statement that was made willfully or not. But what did you think of that?
Yes, I saw that there was an argument about whether this was inadvertent or it was intentional or it was deliberate. Those three little words have become quite some center of argument in court. For me, the bigger issue, of course, Sakina, the previous court, which is being appealed against, had said, they believe the president, that the president said something because he lacked facts. He went and found out more and he came and corrected it. And that's the end of the matter. But it does seem that it's not the end of the matter because the team, the legal team of Advocate Mkhwebane is raising this issue. But more importantly for me, the bigger issue they are raising is, should the president, given that even though he was not an official of government when he was raising funds, but as a member of parliament, as a deputy president of the country, shouldn't we pursue him? Isn't there in fact, there is a section of the Constitution that regulates his conduct, both what he says and what he does. And I think those are the things that are being raised now.
And then, of course, the public protector, on her part, again, an independent panel has now been established by the Speaker of Parliament to actually start that process into looking into her fitness to hold office. And this, of course, speaks to the integrity of not only Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, but obviously the office that she holds. And given all the struggles that we've seen Advocate Mkhwebane have to fight, including this latest application to the Concord, and also the number of cases that she has lost during her tenure as public protector, how does this augur for herself first as the public protector, the person, and the office of the public protector, Professor Maluleke?
Yeah, it never rains but pours for her. It was so uncanny that this panel was appointed just at the time when an appeal is being heard in the Constitutional Court. That coincidence cannot be good for her soul and her psyche. Clearly, the rules that have been set by Parliament are that a public protector can be removed from office if she's found to be incapacitated, probably physically or mentally incapacitated, or if she is found to have committed misconduct, or if she is incompetent. Now, it seems to me that incompetence is the main argument that was put to Parliament, at least by the DA, and that will be probed by that powerful three-member panel that you have referred to. So we again will have to wait and see what that panel finds, because at the heart of it is, given the number of legal losses she has suffered, does she have the competence to do this job? And of course, the question of bias that you and I have referred to. But even if this panel were to find that she doesn't pass in any of those three key criteria, it's not up to them to decide whether she loses her job or not. They would have to go back to Parliament, and Parliament must vote on this and take a decision. And that might be very, very interesting. It could become complicated, Sakina.
Now, just a final question, Professor Maluleke. Do you believe that the public protector is fit to hold office, given everything that has played out? And I also just want to perhaps throw in here the fact that those who are in support of the public protector, who have questioned this whole notion of state capture, would argue that the legal fraternity and the courts have been against the public protector and those associated with former President Jacob Zuma, for instance. So what is your view? Is she fit to hold office? And if we do talk about state capture in its proper sense, does that mean the judiciary can also be captured?
Yeah, Sakina, I thought you were my friend all these years. I labored under that impression. Look, it doesn't matter what I or you or someone thinks about the fitness to hold office of the public protector. It's quite honestly irrelevant. She is the public protector at the moment. So clearly our Parliament at one stage, and still does actually, believe that she is fit to hold office. Otherwise, she wouldn't be in that office. So I don't think we should speculate about that until a proper pronouncement by an authoritative body. And the most authoritative body to pronounce on that is Parliament, ultimately, once the panel has done its job. It is true that she has lost a lot of cases. It is true that she seems to have struggled. You remember she wanted to amend the Constitution. She said something about the Reserve Bank. So there have been a few serious or rather obvious mistakes that she has made. But lawyers do make mistakes and lawyers do lose cases. So it is possible for those on her side to argue differently. What is important for you and I is to know that the office of the public protector is a very important cog in the machinery of South African democracy. That much is very clear, whether the incumbent is Busisiwe Mkhwebane or someone else.
And Professor, I see you neatly sidestepped my question about capture of the judiciary. Is that a possibility?
Well, of course, it is not impossible. when capture is in motion, it is not impossible for it to include the judiciary. What I must add, though, is that enough has been done, or rather, quite a lot. Maybe not. Let me not say enough. Quite a lot has been done to shield the judiciary from capture. So, for example, the judges are the only people who have a salary for life. And that is to make sure that they are not easy to capture. And then you also have this odd number of judges panels so that there is never a draw when judgments are being made, for example. So I think there are several checks and balances in place to try and shield the judiciary. It's not impossible. We've seen it happen elsewhere. I don't think it is happening in this country. I have no evidence that this has happened so far in this country.
Professor Tiniko Maluleke, always a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks so much for being with us on Morning Live. And that, of course, Professor Tiniko Maluleke, political analyst, speaking to us about yesterday's application to the Constitutional Court by the Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, appealing that North Gauteng High Court ruling that went against her previously. And lots of talk around the jurisdiction of the Public Protector's Office, what they can and cannot investigate. And as you heard in that analysis, it raises so many important and interesting questions about our democracy and what can and cannot be done by different officers. With that, it's time for the news at 6.